All right, let me bring to order the statewide Transportation Planning Strategic Planning Committee. There's an echo in that. Let me back off that. If you would, Janine, if you would come to the podium and kick off our committee.
Good afternoon, members of the board and of the Strategic Planning Committee. It is an honor and a privilege to come before you, as always, but particularly today with information from one of the other agencies that I am director of, the Atlanta Region Transit Link Authority. Its jurisdiction is a 13-county metro area, and we'll show you some of that information. We have a lot of work going on over there, particularly, as you may be aware, the express buses. These are big, large commuter coaches that come in from the suburbs. There's changes underway there. And we're taking a look at how we can do better long-range planning for the 13-county metro area based on core principles and a fiscally constrained viewpoint about how transit can help our economy and the customers that otherwise might not have a ride to work and other locations in a cross-county format, as well as the Transit Trust Fund, which you may be aware, Commissioner of DOT is the trustee of the trust fund, and there's an allocation that's given every year to Metro Atlanta, and that allocation is managed by the Atlanta Region Transit Link Authority. So we have a lot of responsibilities. These are some of the highlights, and I wanted to share those with you today. To do so, though, I'm going to bring up Kane Williamson. He is the Deputy Director at the ATL. The ATL's first ever Deputy Director. Kane is a native of Southeast Georgia, coastal Georgia, and has been doing transit and transportation planning for at least 20 years, if not more. Kane and I have known each other for about 20 years and worked together in various roles during that time. So, Kane, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Janine. I appreciate that. And thank you all for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today. We will dive right in. So to sort of rehash a little bit of what Janine just talked to you about, we're going to talk about who the ATL is and what we do today, and then move into some of the more detail on some of the other topics like the Redefine the Ride effort, our regional blueprint for planning, and the Transit Trust Fund. So just a little bit about, there's one right here, thanks. I didn't realize it was there. The ATL was created in 2018 by the state legislature and tasked really with facilitating the creation and implementation of a seamless transit system across the 13-county metropolitan Atlanta region. And you can see there on the screen those 4 or 5 things that we do functionally, but also how we'll talk a little bit how we use those functions to facilitate the creation of that system. So we do operate the express bus system that's here in Metro Atlanta, the large gauge buses that Janine was mentioning. We do some regional planning, regional transit plan. We're obligated by the state to produce a regional transit plan and update it on a regular basis. We also have a pretty significant hand in sort of managing and coordinating the flows of state and federal transit dollars that flow through and to the Metro Atlanta region. We have a role in approving local governments in the metro area to be able to pursue county transit-based transit SPLOST as prescribed in law as well. And then we provide a fair amount of technical assistance to local governments as well, because as you can imagine, there are some local jurisdictions who are very sophisticated in their approach to transit, and then there are some in the metro area that might be not as familiar with operating transit systems. So our board, we have a 16-member board of directors. The governor appoints our chair, and currently our chair is Steve Brock. And the lieutenant governor has 2 appointees to our board. The speaker has 2 appointees to our board, and the commissioner is an ex officio non-voting member of the board. And then we have 10 districts in the area. These districts are created intentionally to cross local jurisdictional boundaries in hopes of fostering a more collaborative and regional mindset in the decision-making process, the policy-setting process that the board goes through. And you can see they're listed in that table who each of the board members is for each of those districts. We are in the process right now of re-electing 5 of our districts. Every 4 years, the odd number, and then alternative years, the even number of districts are reelected. So we have 2 more elections tomorrow. The elections have to happen under the Gold Dome during session, and so we are actively pursuing those at the moment. Just a little bit more about Express as a service provision. We operate these buses in AM and PM peak periods across 13 counties in Metro Atlanta on weekdays only. And then in particular, this is commuter service in that it means that we do not have to provide paratransit services. Those are the smaller buses for elderly and disabled folks who might not be able to make it into the larger system. And you can see there at the bottom how we were funded in fiscal year 24. About 38% of our funding came from state appropriations, 55% comes from federal grants, and then 7% are the fares that we collect and some other general revenues as well. Currently, we operate 197 trips a day across these 13 counties. That's AM and PM peak. Roughly half of those would operate in the morning and half of them would operate in the evening. We have 54 stops in downtown, midtown, and perimeter. Those are our 3 primary service markets. So you can see that the service has been traditionally focused on white-collar office markets. We have 27 park and ride lots across the 13 counties. We own 12 of those. 8 of them we lease from private landowners, and then 6 of them belong to other local governments or to the department in some way, and we just have shared use agreements with those entities. We have 2 operations and maintenance facilities, one in Gwinnett County that we share with Gwinnett County, actually, with the Gwinnett County Transit System, and one in Clayton County that we own and operate ourselves. And we currently have about 164 buses on property. We routinely poll our ridership to see how they're feeling about the service, and you can see here we have very good numbers. 85% of the folks who ride our service responded that they are satisfied or very satisfied with our service. And the array of categories you see there, they're very pleased with the on-board experience and mostly pleased with our on-time performance and our park and ride lots. So that's good news. The maybe not quite so good news is that our ridership is low. You can see that pre-pandemic we were doing pretty well, but then the pandemic hit, and across the country, those transit services that served primarily regular office commutes suffered pretty substantially. Excuse me. Big drop, very big drop. And you can see that we have been slowly climbing out of that big drop over the past 4 or 5 years, but we are still roughly 30% of our pre-pandemic ridership, which is disappointing. But it is a reality. And so in the fiscal 25 state budget, the legislature recognized this and reduced the amount of contribution it made to our budget by $4 million and directed us to develop a plan to reduce service levels in recognition of the reduced ridership and to implement that plan before the end of fiscal year 25. And another issue that we're facing is the ending of the CARES Act dollars that the federal government provided to help transit properties through the pandemic. So at the end of this fiscal year, we will have run out or come close to running out of the CARES Act dollars that we have. So there are a number of fiscal imperatives here that are forcing us to think about how we restructure the system and provide the services. So let's talk a little bit about what that plan looks like now. So you can see those numbers on the left side of the screen there in the red boxes. We talked a little bit about those already. And then the blue boxes are where we are headed, based on the set of recommendations that we will be making to our board on April 3rd. So we'll be reducing the number of trips that we offer on a daily basis from 197 to 110. 12 of those trips will terminate at MARTA stations toward the periphery of the region. So some will come into the perimeter center stations, and some will serve the Lakewood-Fort McPherson station down on the south side. That would be coming in from the Georgia 400 corridor and the I-85 South corridor, respectively. We'll also be reducing the number of park and ride lots that we own and operate. So we'll end this with the ownership of 11 rather than 12 park and ride lots, and we'll reduce the number of lots that we lease from 8 to 2, so substantially reducing our lease cost associated with the lots that we lease. And we'll continue partnerships with the other local governments and states who we share lots with. And we'll be reducing the number of stops from 54 to 41, hopefully increasing our efficiency in service delivery there. And so you can see the map on the screen there too. It's a little out of context because it doesn't show all of the routes that we operate now as compared to the routes that we plan to operate, but we are consolidating routes as well. So that for instance, there are in let's just say the I-20 corridor, there are 3 or 4 routes that currently operate. We'll consolidate that down to a single route so it is more intelligible for the user and also more efficient to operate. This is just a peek at what the stops in downtown and midtown look like. There's still a fair number of stops that are operated there. And that is because when we took this plan out for the initial plan out for public engagement, we had proposed reducing many of these stops from 45 down to 12, and instead taking many of the routes into end-of-line MARTA stations. The public feedback was overwhelming in that they did not want to do that. They wanted us to continue the stops into downtown and midtown because it got them a one-seat ride to their ultimate destinations. And so we said, okay, we can do that, but that means that you're going to have fewer trip options as you at the other side of this analysis. So we're trading essentially frequency for coverage in terms of the service that we're providing. This feedback, a little bit more about the feedback we received on the plan. The concerns that people had, as you might expect, are about the schedules and the trip changes. So wanting to make sure that the new schedules, the new times of the trips that we offer will match their work schedules and enable them still to be able to get to work on time or to leave work at a reasonable hour and still make their trip home. There was some concern about losing park and ride lots. So if you're accustomed to going to one and now that one's going to go away, you have to drive a little further to get to the next park and ride lot. That's a minor inconvenience. And then obviously the route changes are problematic as well. Folks were concerned a little bit about having to transfer to MARTA, mostly probably from the perspective of adding time to their trips and complication to their trips. And then they've also recently begun to express concerns about the potential for overcrowding of the buses as people are being called back into the office on a more regular basis. And so we've heard all of that and tried to factor that into the final set of recommendations. About our schedule here, we plan to take this final recommendation to our board at its meeting on April 3rd and ask them to adopt it and authorize implementation of it. And then by June, we will be in the process of implementing the service change. So stepping away a little bit from the service delivery that we do and sort of abstracting more to the higher level regional planning that we undertake, as I mentioned earlier, we are obligated under statute to produce a regional transit plan on behalf of the entire 13 counties. And so we have done that once, updated it a couple of times, and we were about to undertake another update of that plan. But before we did that, we wanted to be very clear about what our guiding principles would be for that plan. And so you can see here on the screen that we've gone through this analysis to create a strategic blueprint, which is essentially produce 3 pillars that we'll rest the plan upon as we go through the analysis process. The first is competitiveness. Essentially, we've looked at our competitor regions, our economic development competitor regions across the country, and analyzed what their programs and plans look like from a transit basis, and want to make sure that we are not under-investing in our system, but not overtaxing ourselves to provide the system so that we remain competitive on both those fronts with our competitor regions. We also want to get very clear about who our customers are. So we want to focus on who our customers are, where they're going, and how best to provide that service. And then also making sure that there is the ability to get across local jurisdictions to go places for work, for school, for other purposes. And making sure that not only those services do exist across those lines, but they connect to local services that are operating within a county as well, so that there's reasonable connection for everyone. And then a little bit about the trust fund. Janine mentioned that the commissioner in his role as the trustee has contributed or allocated money to the ATL board to make some decisions. You can see in fiscal '24, that allocation was $12.5 million. We have awarded 10.3 of that so far, and we have about 2.2 left to allocate. And I'll talk to you a little bit about in a second about what those projects were that were allocated these funds. And then in fiscal '25, we just reached an agreement with the commissioners to receive $20 million for fiscal '25 that we will soon be making decisions about how to allocate. So the dollars that we have allocated so far, you can see them on the screen there. We've put money towards some regional software that multiple operators in the county in the region use to do some transit planning. And then we've invested some money in MARTA's airport station rehabilitation project, sort of Atlanta's front door, the region's front door. We have put money toward micro-transit pilot projects in Cobb, in Gwinnett, and at the airport area CIDs. And then we've also invested money in the sustaining of our ATL Rides app. It's an app that we developed to ensure that people have the ability to plan trips, transit trips across the entirety of the region, not just in one jurisdiction or another. And then we also have put money toward moving the Express system, the Cobb system, the Gwinnett system, and Douglas County's system in the direction of implementation of MARTA's new automated fare collection system. So you may be familiar with the Breeze system now. It's being updated in advance, and so we are making sure that the rest of the region can keep pace with that change. And that's all I have. I'm glad to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you. A couple of questions. You mentioned the airport a few times in there. Do the buses that you operate, do any of the buses go directly to the airport?
No, sir, they don't go to the airport now.
Okay.
I think at one time they may have, and then it got very complicated in terms of the amount of vehicles that are coming into those terminals, right? So I think we're ready to have another conversation if the airport is ready to have a conversation.
Well, let me ask you this as it relates to that. Say I'm in Ackworth somewhere, which I think I saw that as a point on here, and I wanted to get from Ackworth to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. Do you know what that might roughly look like? What would I have to do to get from Ackworth to Atlanta's airport?
It would be a difficult trip on the transit system today. Not impossible, but difficult. And long.
It'll be a long time planning for me as a traveler to, yeah. And, okay, that's fair. And I appreciate the fact that you're working on that too, especially, and, yeah.
That is one of the initial purposes of the ATL, was to help coordinate that.
Right.
We have completed about a year ago, and this data is working really, really well. Behind the scenes, we have captured all of the operational data, real-time operational data from all the transit operators, including CobbLink and MARTA that you would likely use to get there. And or on a weekday, if you were going at 9 in our morning rush hour, you could pick up an express bus. All that data that's of what buses are going when and times and schedules, ATL has consolidated all that and availed that to Google Maps. We also have our own ATL Rides app, but it tends to be much easier just to go to Google Maps. So that is available today. You can plan your trip in Google Maps on transit.
Okay.
Again, it's going to be arduous and it's going to be long.
Thank you.
But it's available.
But one final question, if I could, Mr. Chairman, as it relates to your demographic makeup of users, could you explain that, especially as it relates to, as I say, economics and age, if you would?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I can speak at a high level. We'll be glad to get you more data on that. Most of our ridership, overwhelming majority of our ridership, is using it to go to a job or to school. We have a fair number of riders that come downtown to go to Georgia State, and we still have some high school students that come downtown to go to Cristo Rey and a couple of other places. So the age range is mostly working adult age, 18 to 65 or so. And the majority of them would identify as minority, I think, and a smaller portion probably would identify as low income.
Thank you.
I'll let him go first.
Thank you.
Before beauty.
I've got a couple of questions. First question is something that I probably should know, but there's a long list of things I probably should know in my life that I don't, so I'm not embarrassed to ask this question. As it pertains to transportation planning in the metropolitan area, educate me on how that fits with ARC planning. Are you the ARC planning arm, or?
The Atlanta Regional Commission is a 20-county planning organization designated by the federal government to create short and long-range plans. No federal money can be spent in Metro Atlanta without going through the ARC. That's road or transit or any surface transportation has to go through ARC. And those are made up of, that board is made up of mostly local officials and some citizen representatives. The ATL is a 13-county. In law, it's written as 13-county. It has nothing really to do with federal designations at all, although we do handle federal money on behalf of the state and the region. And we do create a plan. That is our job in law. We hand that plan to ARC to bring it into the broader plan for the metro area.
So, but the organizations are not connected in any way?
Correct. We do have some overlapping board members, but that's about it. And when in all of my roles, I'm the commissioner, interact regularly, coordinate regularly with the staff and the leadership at ARC.
Yep. And
I would just add to that, at a staff level, we have a routine meeting with the ATL staff on a monthly basis to make sure
Right.
we're remaining coordinated.
Okay. And my second question concerning ridership, first is the capacity on the fleet that you have now. What would you say the capacity is? Are you using half the seats or less?
Yeah, I should have had, I don't remember that number. It is,
We have, what we call that is utilization. In other words, the number of seats that are filled over the course of a period of time. We don't tend to do it day by day because particularly Mondays and really Fridays are not high ridership days. It's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So our average seat utilization today is 16 to 17%. We believe that we have the best chance with this new plan to double that. That's our aim. And then we think return to office policies, federal office, City of Atlanta, others are going to increase that ridership.
Well, it seems to me with your ridership satisfaction information that you presented, which was really, really good, more of us ought to think about using that. But I live in Newnan, and I don't really hear a lot about that. I've talked to a few people along the way that use that regularly or did use it, but at least in the community I live in, it's not talked about as an alternative to driving into town. As I drove in this morning, I noticed there were a lot of people that were not on your bus coming with me.
it's a fair point, and our board has been pushing us to be more communicative about our service. Knowing that we were about to change the service substantially, we've been a little shy about really saying too much about it, but I think that as soon as we've implemented these changes and gotten the system stable, you'll see us begin to communicate a little more frequently about it.
Okay, thank you for your report.
Yes, sir.
Just tying to, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just tying to the comments, again, marketing the campaign so that people understand that you are there, you're back, you're safe. I think safety was an issue around the pandemic. You're back, you're safe, and you're a viable option. And you're right, and so I assume that's on the plan to do a marketing campaign of some sort, yes.
We won't be able to call it marketing because of the way federal requirements are.
You can call it whatever you like. Just get the ridership up to beyond 16 to 17%. Airport, I just left a meeting at the airport. So I think the airport and the routing as part of my congressional district is important. A lot of people do travel. We've got the busiest airport in the world. And so I think there's an opportunity there if buses can be somehow as part of the overall plan incorporated to go to the airport. It might take you a couple of days to get there, but nevertheless, you do arrive when you get there.
I'd love to speak to that. Commissioner and myself had met with the prior leadership at the airport and know that they are very interested in transit service
Yes,
for workers in particular, not
Yeah.
just for
Yeah.
passengers.
yes, absolutely.
So that, along with some of the work we're doing on the strategic blueprint, we've done some initial data collection. And we'll share with you the little pamphlet that we gave to all the legislators this year that has this data point on the back.
Got it.
But we're taking a look at what are called in-person employment centers. In other words, places you have to be at the work site to do the job. Airport is amongst the top of the list,
Absolutely.
clearly. And we know today that about 30% of the trips to the airport, Hartsfield area, are from outside the MARTA territory. Just a third of them, just today, and that's people who can drive there. We believe that they likely have opportunity to gather more workers from outside the Fulton DeKalb and Clayton if there were transit services available. The tricky part is, as we were discussing earlier, what kind of buses are the best ones to go in there, because it's already so crowded. But also, what are the right shift alignments, because they do have very different shifts than our current express does. So a lot of factors to consider, and that's underway.
Absolutely, I agree. And then one last request from me. I'd like to understand the changes that are for the 5th Congressional, because a large portion of this will touch the 5th Congressional, so I'd like to understand that so that we're in sync, and then we've got the right communication to all the stakeholders to show the value and where we're going long-term. So, okay, so that's my ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of slides back, correct me if I'm wrong, you had mentioned that ridership was down since COVID. And I think that may have been answered. So when everybody was told to stay home and work, that's probably one of the reasons why. But I would be interested in maybe either demographic or geographic areas where we're seeing ridership down maybe more in this particular area than over in maybe North Metro or South Metro. I think that would be interesting information, but I think you just mentioned that as everyone's called back to the office, we may see that kind of tick up a little bit and ridership start to increase. But I noticed Hiram on there. I may try to, along the line of Board Member McIntyre's questioning, I may try to jump on and see a committee hearing and just see, hey, I'm going to meet in Hiram and take the bus in and see how that trip goes. I mean, that might be an opportunity there.
We'd love that.
Yeah.
You'd have to start your day coming to Atlanta in the morning.
Okay.
So that you can pick up that trip. So that you can pick up that departure from Hiram into the city. But
Okay.
love that.
Yeah, I'll get with y'all offline on times and stuff like that, but I think that would be a worthwhile trip, maybe to come into a meeting or a board meeting having used the transit system.
Question, Mr. Chair, but just a statement, and I want to thank Kane for his work and Janine for her leadership. As a member of the ATL board, as you can see those ridership numbers, and continuing to do the same thing just didn't make any sense, and they've done a great job, and especially as Janine's talking about the employment centers too, as they continue to plan strategically. There's some real promise there along the way, but I just want to commend them and thank Kane for his work and for this presentation. Really good presentation of detail, and hats off to them for making it better, be more efficient, more effective as this rolls out here very shortly. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions from anybody on the committee or off the committee? If not, Commissioner, thank you for your comments, and wrapping that up. Kane, thank you for coming, and Janine, as always, committee stands adjourned.
I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. We've got a very capable, very, very capable Angela Wentworth, our treasurer, who will take us through the finance budget update.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chairwoman, members of the Board, Commissioner. I'm here this afternoon to present to you the final, hot off the press, signed into the books by the governor, amended 25 budget recommendation, and to discuss the fiscal year 26 recommendation thus far. So as you can see on this first slide here, there was an additional $244 million brought in excise in the state general fund component of the budget. This consists primarily of the $1 billion, which is for freight, local roads administration, the storm response, and GTIP. And we are very, very appreciative to the governor's office, the House, and the Senate for these additional dollars. Since last month, there's not a whole lot has drastically changed from this amended FY25 budget. As you can see on this chart here in capital projects, roughly $1.4 billion makes up capital construction and capital maintenance. I will highlight, I left local roads admin out of this section because I wanted to include it with LMIG, so you could see that there's roughly over $500 million now going to local assistance for LMIG and LRA. And routine maintenance makes up roughly 19% of the budget, and this is basically for roads, roadside enhancements, bridges. In the freight component, there was an add in freight for $500 million. Y'all may recall last year in the amended budget for 24, there was an add for $500 million in freight. So that happened again this year. General operations consists primarily of administration, data collections, planning, program delivery, and traffic management, all those offices that help get the projects going and ready. It's $301 million. And then GEO bond debt consists of roughly 3%, and then intermodal, payments to CERTA, and ATL is 3% or less. Here we can get into a little bit more of the details of the amended 25 budget. As you can see in airport aid, there's an additional $7.8 million. This gives us the ability to do more capacity and safety projects. There's an additional $110.9 million that was brought into capital construction to help do, for additional capacity for some of the projects that we have. In capital maintenance, there was the add of $100 million, and really what this does is help offset the inflationary costs that we're seeing on resurfacing of projects, because the actual cost to do this is really almost doubled in value. In data collections, you'll see $9,000 there, and that is to support our required federal reporting that we must do. On this next slide, there in departmental admin, you'll see an additional $1 million that's being added for IT and cybersecurity. In LMIG, the $24 million is truing up the 10% of excise number. Local roads admin, you can see there that they appropriate an additional $265 million into local roads admin to help with support local infrastructure needs. In ports and waterways, there was an additional $2.4 million, and this is our state share of the dike raising project in Savannah that we have going on with the Corps of Engineers. And then finally, in program delivery, there's an additional $1.6 million. And what that is to help deliver that much larger program that we're seeing between the add from amended fiscal year 24 and now in amended fiscal year 25. In the rail program, we have an add of $12.9 million, and this is to help upgrade to Class 2 standards our rail lines, in which you have to be able to carry 286,000 pounds and travel at least 25 miles per hour on those lines. So those are additional dollars that go in to meet some of those needs. In routine maintenance, you'll see here the additional 5.4 for increased contracting and material costs, and you'll see the additional $200 million that we requested to help with the storm relief and storm response that's still going on currently as of now. In traffic management, you'll see additional $500,000, and what that is basically a cost associated with safety technology plus improved customer service needs for driveway permits that we're experiencing, and this will help offset with that. Next, you can see in the freight, there was a $500,000 add that we had that was put into freight, similar to the amended FY24 to help with capital infrastructure projects that we have. In payments to CERTA, there's an additional $46 million being added to GTIP that supports local infrastructure projects. However, I will make the comment that they carved out $7.5 million that can be utilized for airport projects, and so this is the first of that. Then you have payments to ATL, as you heard him previously talking. Kane did, and payment CATL is part of our overall budget that we help fund as well. But there was no change for the amended 25. So for the amended 25, the big changes that we had were in freight, local roads admin, in the GTIB, and for storm response. So overall, it was a really, really good amended 25. Any questions on the amended
I
25?
got a quick question, if I
Yes.
may. You mentioned storm response. I must have missed that. What was the amount they gave for?
200 million. They gave us
200 million, okay.
200 million.
Angela, what was the amount you said, the additional monies in the governor's budget to the 25 amended budget? What was the additional monies that was appropriated to us? 1 point something?
Oh, talking about the 1 billion in state general fund?
Is it 1 billion?
We had 1,034,725,467 in state general funds that were put into our budget. And those were spread amongst freight, the local roads admin program, storm response, and GTIP.
Is that different from the line item last year of the 1.5 billion? Am I confusing
Yeah,
those?
that was last year's budget.
But-
We got additional add this year.
So last year was 1.4 and 1.5, and this
This
year
year's
is
1 billion and some change.
1 billion. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Any other questions on 25 before I move into 26? Okay. Moving into fiscal year 26, this recommendation that you see today is the House's recommendation as of this time. The commissioner went last week toward the end of the week and presented it to the Senate toward the end of last week. We'll probably know, Josh may talk about this, we'll probably have the Senate version come out some time next week, toward the end of next week. So currently right now, we have an additional $274 million that is being allocated for excise. This is an estimate that was given to us by the state economist that will change as we go through the amended budget next year. You'll see an additional $9.6 million and $5.5 in the trust funds, and those are based on actual 24 collections that we have. And then in the state general fund add, you see of $3 million. This is roughly a combination of 3 items. And I'll get into more detail of that. It's the restoring of the locomotive diesel tax cut that was originally in the 26 budget. It was the elimination of the one-time funding for Chatham County, the $500,000, and then there was additional dollars that was added to airport aid. But I'll get into that in more detail in a second. Okay, on this chart you can see that capital projects makes up roughly over 50% of the overall budget for the department. In routine maintenance, it's roughly at $562 million. Like I said before, it does roads, roadside improvements, and as well as bridges. The general operations makes up 11%. LMIG, truing up the LMIG component to 10% of excise is the $247. As you can see, the debt, it makes up roughly $4 at $101 million. Intermodal, which is airport aid, rail, transit, and waterways, makes up 3%. And then payments to CERTA and payments to the ATL make up less than 1% of it. All right. Currently, right now, we have you see a reduction of $13.3 million in GeoBond debt service. What this is just strictly truing up the debt service for the department. In airport aid, you can see this ad here. In airport aid of $3.6 million, which the majority of that was a ad by the House version of $3.639 for airport aid. Then you can also see in capital construction, there was the ad of $107 million. This gives us the ability to do gives us additional capacity for some projects, as well as the capital maintenance, which makes up $110 million in the budget. It helps offset that inflationary cost that we're seeing for resurfacing. And data collections, and you'll see a lot of this as I get ready to go through the programs that have employees in them. There's a lot of statewide changes such as DOS insurance and some TeamWorks billing, and you'll see a lot of that throughout these programs. So data collections has some of that in it, statewide changes, and reflects the increased cost for the federal reporting. Departmental admin, you have an increase of $2.3 million. This is for IT costs and cybersecurity. LeMeg, you can see us truing up LeMeg to 10% of excise. And planning's budget, as well as ports and waterways, those are mostly all those statewide changes for DOS insurance or the TeamWorks, our billing that we do. And then in program delivery, the 4.1 million is a combination of those statewide changes as well as the cost of delivering a much larger program, as you know, Mr. McIntyre mentioned, between amended 24 and 25. Next, in the rail program here, you can see basically these are some statewide changes, the 2,175. In locomotive diesel funds, you can see there's no change there. Previously, there was a reduction of $4.8 million. They restored that cut, the House did. So you see that reflected there as zero. In routine maintenance's budget, the $33 million and some change, that helps again with that increased contracting and material cost that we're seeing in in the routine maintenance budget. Traffic management's the $8 million. That helps support the district and the TMC from streamlining the review process that we have on these commercial driveway permit and permitting costs, help with better turnaround on delivering of those to the public. So those dollars will be utilized there. In transit, the $5.5 million, a portion of that goes and is transferred to the ATL, and the remainder goes through a formula distribution that is allocated throughout the state. Also, you can see the additional $4.8 million in the Transportation Trust Fund. Those basically run the federal transportation, the FTA program, and it also helps with our matching fund. And then finally, you'll see the reduction of $500,000, and that is the removal of that one-time funding that I was referring to for Chatham County. All right, and then next you'll see payments to the ATL. There's no changes here, but they added language that, you know, basically for them to go back and review ridership and report back to OPB, the House and the Senate budget offices by September 1st and analyzing. You've heard a lot about the ATL from him previously. And then lastly, in payments to CERTA, that whopping $150 is to true up the Garvey debt service. And that is the House's recommendation, and I'm be curious to see how the Senate lands next week. Any questions?
Hearing no questions? Commissioner?
Thank you for indulging me. I just, again, want to appreciate Angela for presenting, but acknowledge the governor recognizing additional $1 billion of state general fund money to our budget, especially for the $200 million in storm relief to maintenance. If we did not have that in our budget, our routine maintenance activities, we would not be working today. So that's very important. That's kept us solid, kept us going while we have to pay the bills for the storm cleanup that Tim still gets to enjoy to see on a daily basis in his part of the world, and all the way over to Augusta. I know Dan's not here, but up through his district. But certainly just want to acknowledge that. Certainly a big investment in freight. Again, Angela said $500,000. It's $500 million. That sounds better than $500 million.
Oh, excuse me.
$500 million. Again, to recognize the growing need of addressing our freight that we have. And so just again, I think it's a wonderful opportunity. Just again, we should always say thank you for that. We had this such a favorable consideration in this budget year for that amount of recognition, and I'm very thankful for that. It makes it a lot more fun.
And I also want to give a thanks to Julia Johnson at OPB, and Abby Day with the House, and Emily Elder with the Senate for helping us get this over the finish line for the amended FY25. So we've been really blessed this year in our budget.
Jeff has
I have a question. This may be for you as well, Commissioner, but the additional $500 million in freight, can you provide maybe one or two examples of how that may specifically be used?
Absolutely. We've got a great freight plan that Janine has put together for us to focus on what's the strategic needs. A large portion of that's going to go to support the widening of I-16 out of Savannah up to this small place called the Hyundai Meta Plant that we toured last year, and so we're putting a big sizable portion into that. The other needs, especially identified out of the Coastal Empire study to keep freight moving in Georgia, which the Port of Savannah supports. You know, previously that's been some of the criticism from members of General Assembly is, well, hey, the port, you know, we're making a lot of investments around the port. Well, the port drives all of Georgia and the eastern seaboard, so these dollars can help go do that without impacting any other project that might be in any of your districts. So it's really paying it forward on a lot of investment in and around the port, but just like we saw last year in the amended budget, able to advance 40 some odd projects by 42 years, you know, so we're able to speed up projects and keep those going that are already on our books. But some of the new things were like trying to get I-16 widened all the way up to the Hyundai plant. These dollars will help us satisfy that objective.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, finance is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela.
Just calling to order the Legislative Committee and calling Josh Waller to present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Thompson, Madam Chair, members of the committee, full board, commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to present this March legislative update, which is the last update before sine die, but who's counting the days? Speaking of days, here's our handy dandy calendar we always start out with. Yesterday was Legislative Day 32. Today was a committee day, and boy, what is it a committee day, because it started bright and early at 6 a.m. We'll touch on that here in a little bit, but committee day today, 8 legislative days remaining over the next 2.5 weeks, and so we will see as sort of the last round of bills make their way. Since the last time we met on February the 19th, we've had crossover day, which is that day that one bill has to pass one chamber or the other to be able to continue as a vehicle. That same day was the day the governor signed his amended budget. And as the treasurer detailed the amended budget as well as the FY26 budget, the House has passed that on the 11th of March in the Senate. And as Angela said, it's likely they would probably take it up sometime next week, putting them acting maybe towards the end of the week so that they spend the last week of session, and this is speculative just off previous years, last week of session working through the conference committees between the House and Senate on their final versions of the FY26 budget, which constitutionally those two budgets are the only duty of the General Assembly during a session. Everything else is just icing on the cake. So we'll jump into legislation that has crossed over. The first one I want to highlight, we didn't touch on it too much last meeting, was House Bill 575, which is the Department's housekeeping bill, which we touched on at the start of the session, but we got the bill introduced by Representative McCollum. And there on the screen, I won't go through all of them, but there on the screen is a refresher of what was included in it. 4 items. It passed the House on March the 4th by a vote of 164 to 1. And it was in Senate Transportation Committee, and I am glad to report as of about 1:15 today, it passed out of Senate Transportation Committee with a friendly amendment on it dealing with the bullet dealing with the TRIP program that just makes clear that when the accident that's being tripped needs to have, just making clear that it's impeding traffic. They really want to underscore the value of the program, which is the point of the program, is you've got traffic backed up and a truck that needs to be removed as quickly as possible. So another series of bills that we talked about last month, there were 3 or 4 or 5 speed zone camera bills, but only 2 of them dealing with the cameras operating the school zones. Only 2 of them crossed over, both House bills. House Bill 225, Representative Washburn, completely repeals them. It passed the House on March 4th, a vote of 129 to 37. Separate bill by Representative Alan Powell, House Bill 651. It did some signage requirements. It also included the feedback sign that says your speed is compared with what the speed limit is, and it restricted the hours of operation to 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. Just as a reminder, in current law today, it's 1 hour when school starts, all the way through the school day to an hour after school ends is the period of time that the cameras are allowed to operate. They're not supposed to be operating on weekends. They're not supposed to be operating on nights. They're only supposed to be operating during those. So this bill, though, would restrict it to hour before school starts, and after school, an hour after, and an hour before it lets out, and an hour after. It would split the fine revenue between the local law enforcement and then the school system for school safety projects. And then it passed the House 164-8. So they were both are in a Senate Public Safety Special Subcommittee that met this morning at 6 a.m., bright and early. Lasted a fun 3 hours. Very appreciative of our state traffic engineer, Alan Davis, and Sam Harris on his team, who came and responded to some questions from the committee, explained what the process looks like for our role in it, which is simply we are the permitter. We work with local jurisdictions for permitting those cameras that are not on our system, but essentially we play that permitting role for those cameras under the law. So we will see. There was no action taken in committee today, but we'll find out probably before public safety meets on Friday this week. We'll probably figure out what their recommendation is. If I took a read of the room, I would imagine it's probably somewhere in between these two bills, not a full repeal. Maybe something similar to 651 or some other legislation that did some reforms to the system. But that, again, I wouldn't want to prejudge the committee. So just two more bills that we've noted before. House Bill 224, Josh Bonner, that would just allow us to be able to negotiate with the Department of Defense to do project management, construction management on base for projects. It passed out of the House 172-0. And then the truck weight bill, which we've discussed, that extends the sunset from House Bill 189. It eliminates the sunset. It was set to expire this year on July the 1st. It passed out the House 164-9. It's passed out of the Senate Transportation Committee. But I want to give put a bullet here. In both the House and Senate, there was a lot of focus on, okay, well, as we make this permanent, we need to look at the impact to the system and get a better sense of its costs. And so we've had an ongoing study that we've been working with the University of Georgia on to look at directly the impact of these increased weights on the life cycles of pavements and bridges. And we were pleased to hear from the General Assembly their desire to stay engaged and be aware of that over the next year or two, so they can get a better sense of the impact now that this is going to be permanent. If the governor signs House Bill 164, what that means in terms of long-term investment in transportation. With that, I'll pivot over to federal, unless there's a question on any of the state bills.
I
I got a
comment.
Go ahead.
On the school safety cameras, I served on our school board when we first brought this online, and we have three schools, all three elementary schools on major roads, South Lumpkin, Winton, and Warm Springs Road. Big roads. I cannot tell you how these cameras have slowed traffic all the time around those schools. And they were terrifying sometimes, trying to get traffic to stop or slow down during in and out times. But I know they're pain, and I know a lot of people don't like them, but I just want, from a personal experience, they slow traffic down. And it's a change of mindset. You know now when you're entering close to that school, you gotta slow down. They're effective. I just want to say they're effective.
A comment I'll make from the meeting this morning, I think where I said it comes somewhere in between the two bills, is I think there was an acknowledgement that when schools actually coming in and out, there's a value to it. The concern has been constituent feedback when they feel like they're getting ticketed at night or in the middle of the day. And so that's why I think they're trying to rank.
I know what the two bills are. I've been following it, but the way that I understand, at least locally, our legislation was not during the time when the flashers are going, right? You know, when it's in and out, but in between. You only get a ticket if you're going 10 miles over the regular speed limit. For those three that I just mentioned, the regular speed limit is 35. So you would not get a ticket from a camera unless you were going 46 or over. I'm sorry, but you should. I mean, it's just, they're effective. They're incredibly effective.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, two quick questions. You mentioned, as far as the difference between state routes and local roads, remind me again, what is GDOT's role when cameras like these are on a local road?
The initial permitting.
Just,
So,
we do the permitting.
Correct.
Okay.
So that the local, under the law, the school or the school, and what becomes the school board, is the applicant. So they put in applications, and our traffic ops, the Office of Traffic Ops has that permitting process. For those off system, there is, and I will probably defer somebody if you need to get more in the weeds, but there's a certification that will come from them to us to sign off on the permit.
Okay. Second question, if I may. You mentioned that they're looking at some language regarding how the fines are split. And if I heard you right, I think you said a certain percent of the fines are recommended to be split between local law enforcement and then something else.
50/50. So local law enforcement and then the school districts, to the school districts themselves for a defined basket of safety programs.
So if 50% is going to local law enforcement and 50% to the local school district, the business vendor that's providing this service on their behalf, what's their cut, or do you know?
I couldn't speak, every one of those is, as, I'm relaying what I heard in the.
No, I know you are, I just wondered if that was.
An individualized,
It's
agreement.
negotiable. Because when Muskogee County did it, they wanted 80% of the total fines, and then the last 20 would be split. And I think we negotiated it down to 60, and then that 40% would have some split. I think it was 50/50 though, but.
Well, no, if I'm reading between the lines here, what some legislators may be after is squeezing out the private vendor provider, so there's no incentive to offer the service. Okay. And I know you're just reporting. I'm just asking if you know more intent. Thank you.
All right, we'll go to federal updates. So for the last 6 months, the update on federal has, well, short-term. So glad to report today that we have a full federal, halfway through the federal fiscal year, we finally have a full appropriation. Now it's a 99-page continuing resolution, and so it's taking the fiscal year 24 bill, and for the most part, but there's some important exceptions, for the most part, extending it out. So as a context, the FY23 omnibus, which is where they take all the appropriations acts and they squeeze them together, that was 4,200 pages. So this is a 99-page bill, and so on March the 15th in 44 BC, that wasn't a great day for Julius Caesar. But the Ides of March this year proved to be better for transportation because there was an exemption put into the CR that said for transportation, for the Highway Trust Fund, it will be funded at the FY25 levels that were approved in the IIJA. So it will not be held back to the 24 level. So it's about when you look average out, about a 2% increase. So that was, again, the good news of this full year continuing resolution. The other item is because it's a CR, they didn't include, the House side earlier in the year when they passed out some of their bills, had some initial congressional directed spending earmarks, but none of those were ultimately included. So if you saw some news, the House did this, well, the final bill does not have any earmarks in it. And then the last item is the nomination of Sean McMaster to be the Federal Highway Administrator. The President nominated him. He's a Boeing executive who's served different roles at USDOT, including Deputy Chief of Staff and Deputy Assistant Secretary, but also has a prior career on the Hill and the House T&I Committee. So just an item of note, and with that, wraps up.
Are there any other questions? I think that concludes the report, Madam Chair.
Okay, I will call the Intermodal Committee to order, and today we have Justin Thrift to make a presentation to us. Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members and board members. Thank you for the opportunity to give you all an update on our Georgia Freight Rail Program. I'm Justin Thrift. I'm the Rail Program Manager in Intermodal. And the last time I updated this body was a year ago, this week actually, as our first round of GFRP was kind of taken off. So it's good to be back to give you an update. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of walk through a summary of our program before we get into the details of the good work we've done over the past year. So this is sort of the nuts and bolts, if you will, of our Georgia Freight Rail program. The funding portion of our program was established under Title 48 in, I believe, the 21 legislative session or thereafter, but it's also tied to criteria in what's called Georgia Freight Rail Program in Title 32. Both of these statutes focus on being a means of providing a public benefit, or some wording is substantial public benefit, to our rail infrastructure in the state. We do expect this program to be annually recurring, but it is subject to appropriations. So again, the goal of the Georgia Freight Rail Program is to provide a substantial public benefit by way of rail investment across the state, throughout the state. And just as a reminder, both our Class 1 railroads, so that's CSX and Norfolk Southern here in Georgia, are Class 1 railroads, and our short line or regional railroads, or you might hear the terminology Class 2 or Class 3 railroads, smaller railroads. Everyone is eligible for this program, so the big dogs and the little dogs, everybody's eligible. Yeah, so this past November, the rail office put out a NOFO, a Notice of Funding Opportunity, to all the common carriers, that's the terminology in the statute, or rail operators or common carriers throughout the state. This NOFO included copies of the info we have on our program, the policies that established it, application guidance, that type of thing. Here we've got just sort of a breakdown of the sub-programs, if you will, or areas of focus for these rail projects under the Georgia Freight Rail Program. You can see it's broken down into 3 different sub-programs. And just in general, all 3 of these different areas allow for different and specific means to invest in or improve railway equipment or assets. But they could also get into things like infrastructure improvements, industrial siding, storage tracks, industrial rail spurs or lead tracks that actually funnel business into Georgia businesses. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our role. The department's role, the rail office's role, is to distribute these freight rail funds according to an application-based competitive process. But keep in mind, this process, it must, by statute, also take into consideration operational track mileage. So I mentioned earlier, you can see the split there, 67-33. So if you look at all the rail in Georgia, 67% of it by track mile are operated by the Class 1 railroads. The remaining third are by the short line regional railroads that I mentioned earlier. So yeah, just kind of our process, how this program fulfills itself. We put out an OFO. We receive application packages from those who want to participate. We review those applications for basic eligibility. And then we have what's called the RPEC, the Rail Project Evaluation Committee, established by the Commissioner. We meet as an RPEC to review those projects and to affirm and determine that they have or show a substantial public benefit. And it'd be interesting to note, some of the considerations we make during this review process are things like enhanced public safety, enhanced mobility, congestion mitigation, enhanced trade or economic development value, improved air quality or land use, reduction of public expenditures, and just general improved transportation efficiency or infrastructure preservation. You see our timeline here. This timeline includes, I think I mentioned earlier, last year was our first or inaugural round of this program. We're kicking off our second round currently. And this timeline shows both of those. If you start at the far left, you see our 24 NOFO, which actually happened the end of November 23. work your way right across the timeline there, and you can see how we send out award notifications. Finally, the memorandums of agreement between the award recipients and GDOT are sent out, executed, and then we begin work. So we essentially begin work in June of last year, still have active construction ongoing. And then most recently, for this current round, we put out an OFO at the end of November of last year. We are currently in the review process on those projects. Here's a snapshot of last year's projects, so projects from FY24. You see we have one Class 1 project, 5 short line projects. Far right, you see the status. So the 2 smallest short line projects are complete. One of those, and then under that, you see projects 5 and 6, also short line projects. Those are essentially complete and are about ready to be closed out. The Norfolk Southern, the big project up top, is in active construction down in McDonough. And then we're getting close to a bid out, to our bid process on the Sam short line, according to the most recent updates from DNR. And again, these are our first round projects here that you see. And just to kind of profile a couple projects from that list. This was the big Class 1 project, the only Class 1 project that we received last year and awarded for construction of the extension of a passing siding down in McDonough. So a 3.5-mile extension on an existing rail siding. What this is going to do is going to allow long trains. As y'all know, the length of trains has increased dramatically over the years. This is going to allow 2 trains to pass each other. It's going to do that more efficiently. It's going to improve roadway congestion. This project in particular at 6 different at-grade crossings along this 3.5-mile corridor. So all the good stuff that comes along with that, emissions reductions, reduced highway truck volumes, etc. And for a short line project from our 24 pool, this is just outside of Madison. Cater Parrott operates one of our state-owned short lines, or 2 of them actually. They also have their own rail lines that they operate in Middle Georgia and in Madison. So this project that you're looking at on the screen was for rehabilitation, the bridge that you see there. So we essentially came in and replaced structural components to this bridge to just allow for the safe passage of trains over this bridge. So this is, you can see the quote there, all rail traffic in and out of Madison must use this bridge. So it's an important project to the community, to the rural community there. This project supports approximately 500 local jobs from some of the folks you see there in the second bullet point, some big players in the state. And it also supports, this project supports a shipment of over 13 million tons of freight annually and growing. Okay, so sort of now we'll switch to where we are now, and this is it. As I mentioned, our most recent FY25 project pool is it's under review, and we are expecting to be able to make award announcements in the coming weeks. And part of that new pool of projects for FY25 was this project from Norfolk Southern. We kind of wanted to highlight it a little bit. This project is for improvements nearby here at the Howell Y. It's at the end of 14th Street. This is where Norfolk Southern and CSX come together on the north side of town. Very congested area, both rail traffic and, I mean, it's a densely populated area to begin with. So it's just a great example of a project. This project actually is sponsored by Norfolk Southern, but it's going to benefit NS and CSX. It's going to benefit the local community there. It's going to, it's going to remove trucks off the highway, and it's going to reduce emissions and congestion in the area. And it also is, it's going to support growth between multimodal nodes within the state. So the traffic that comes through here, a lot of it comes from the Port Authority, and it's headed to inland ports and that type of thing. So it's going to support that continued growth. Yeah, and finally, just where we're going, kind of what's next. As I mentioned, we expect to be able to make award announcements for this FY25 pool soon. Those projects are under final review as we speak. And yeah, just, you know, to brag on the program, we felt we had a successful round last year, and we feel like we've got a good pool of projects for 25, and we're looking forward to 26 and what that might look like as the budget's finalized. So that's what I've got for you. If I can answer any questions at all.
Any questions of Mr. Thrift? If not, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll call the committee of the whole to order, and I'll ask Bill Wright if he will approach the podium, for he is our local grant administrator, and he's going to bring us some updated information about our LMIG and the LRA.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and Commissioner. Today, I'd like to share some information on our local grants office and our programs. First, we are a large office of 4. I have Charity Belford, Lakeisha Osborne, and Louis Brooker back there. But our overall team, our daily overall team, includes the district state aid coordinators. Our office manages the local maintenance and improvement grant program, which we call LMIG, the quick response program, and the state and federally funded off-system safety programs. For all of these programs, we work closely with the districts, especially the district engineers, of course, the district state aid coordinators, and the state and district traffic operations offices. Our office and the state aid coordinators provide technical support to local governments for grants and applications, and we are often the first point of contact when the local government is trying to inquire about other programs and services that GDOT offers.
Bill, can we get you to advance your slides? I'm sorry about that.
Oh, sorry. There we go. In 2009, Senate Bill 200 created the LMIG program. Senate Bill 200 added that funds allocated each fiscal year for the LMIG program shall not be less than 10% nor more than 20% of the money derived from the motor fuel taxes that are received by the state in the immediately preceding fiscal year. 10% is the percentage that has been used to date, and the bill also directs the planning director to develop a formula for the funding distribution. Now, various factors and weights were studied before a final decision was made to use population and centerline miles, that's paved and unpaved roads, as the determining factors. And the planning director at the time updated the formula with the assistance of an input of the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia and the Georgia Municipal Association. Of course, in 2010, House Bill 277 changed the LMIG match requirements. There became a 10% match for regions that passed the Transportation Investment Act, or TIA, and a 30% match for regions that did not pass TIA. Between 2012 and 2018, of course, 4 of the 12 regions in the state passed TIA, so 65 counties that make up those regions now fall under the 10% match, and the other 94 counties fall under the 30% match requirements. Now, in September 2012, GDOT rolled out the current LMIG program, which allows local governments a great deal of flexibility while taking into consideration the new match requirements. Each local government has complete control of expenditures. All pre-construction activities, advertisements, lettings, and quality of control of work and materials are the responsibility of local governments. All of these expenses, of course, are eligible for LMIG funds and the match requirements. This slide shows you the eligible LMIG project types. Now, all projects identified on a project list are to be constructed in accordance with GDOT's standard specifications. And at the beginning of each fiscal year, each local government is provided with a formula amount of the LMIG funds based on the LMIG formula. And to receive that formula amount, the local government applies to GDOT. Now, items such as beautification, walking trails, landscaping are not eligible for LMIG funding. Now, in fiscal year 2020, the GDOT LMIG application process went electronic. So local governments now apply online. A complete application is typically reviewed and approved by the district state aid coordinator and the state office within 3 to 5 days. Prior to the electronic applications, the process could used to take up to 30 days. Now, once an application is approved, a local government receives their grant funds via check or electronically. And the online application program also allows a local government to view their previous application information dating back to fiscal year 2020. Now, the application evaluation process includes, are the listed projects eligible for LMIG funds? Are any of the projects already on a TIA-approved project list? Does the application signature page include a local government seal and notary seal? Is a cover letter included explaining the progress of previous grant funds? Has the local government provided a statement of final expenditures form and invoices for prior year's work? Once the projects are complete, your district state aid coordinator does a drive-by inspection of those completed projects. GDOT expects typical resurfacing and maintenance projects to be completed within a year from the date of receiving the LMIG grant. More complicated projects are to be substantially complete within 3 years from the date of receiving the grant. And funds can be rolled up to 3 fiscal years. Now, we also look to see if a local government is in audit compliance with the Department of Audits and Accounting, and if they're in compliance with the Department of Community Affairs minimum standards under the Georgia Planning Act related to immigration and the Service Delivery Strategy Law. Now, over the years, the LMIG applications have continued to grow. Fiscal year 25 funding has grown by 80% since 2015. As you know, last year the governor and the legislature generously included Local Road Assistance Administration funds, or the LRA funds, in the amended fiscal year 24 budget. We administered and distributed the funds using our grants LMIG application system. The funding offered a lot of local governments the opportunity to consider needed projects sooner, especially since there was no required local match. The assistance was extremely well received. And this year, we're excited to be able to offer the LMIG or the LRA funds again. Now, what is our timeline for deploying the annual LMIG funds and the LRA funds? The LMIG programs will continue under the same timeframes and guidelines as previous years, starting in July and ending in February of the following year. Tomorrow, we believe we have everything in place to start notifying the local governments about the fiscal year 25 LRA funds. These funds will be available through June 15th, and then of course in July, the fiscal year 26 LMIG funds will become available. Now, another program in our is our off-system safety program. The Off-System Safety Program, or OSS program, was established in 2005 to reduce crashes on off-system routes. At the time, over 40% of the fatalities in Georgia were occurring on off-system routes. Meeting Georgia's goals for fatality reduction requires investment, of course, in improving safety of the on the off the state route system. And for this reason, the OSS program focuses on low-cost safety improvements that can be implemented within the existing right-of-way in order to reduce the frequency and severity of off-system crashes. And we have a state-funded and a federal-funded program. we call the state-funded program Safety Action Plan, or SAP. Occasionally, our office receives funds from the amended budget passed by the legislature in the spring. And when this happens, we use those funds for off-system, non-state route safety projects, such as striping, rumble strips, and shoulder widening. We use a data-driven approach for determining possible locations. The Traffic Operations Office has software called Numetrics that enables us to pull data on where most crashes are occurring. And the district state aid coordinators then do outreach to the respective local governments to see if they're interested in participating. The SAP program is managed very similar to our LMIG process, where an application is submitted by the local government and there is a 10 or 30% match that's required. Now, the federally funded portion of the OSS program receives approximately $7 million each year. The local grants office works very closely with the state traffic operations office and the local governments to ensure that projects are selected using a data-driven approach. Once the projects are selected for the federal program, they follow the entire plan development and letting process. Now, currently we have projects programmed through fiscal year 26, and we typically let between 15 and 20 projects each year. We encourage our local governments that have the resources to assist with the fieldwork data collection if possible, and the projects are typically completed within 1 year once let to construction. Now, due to limited funding, we cannot reach out to everyone, every year. Instead, the state aid coordinators try to work with new local governments each fiscal year. Now, the Quick Response Program is a mechanism to quickly identify, approve, and construct traffic operational improvements on the state route system. Anyone can recommend a project. The district submits a proposal package to the local grants office. The director of operations, the chief engineer's office, and the deputy commissioner review and approve the packages. Once a GPO approval is given by the environmental office, your district state aid coordinator or district traffic operations office solicits bids. The local grants office works with the low bidder to execute the contract. The district manages the construction. Now, for the last few years, the annual statewide budget for this program has been $15 million. And for many years, as per Code Section 32-2-61, the maximum project budget was $200,000. In the past, the department has been able to do many operational improvements using the quick response process, such as turn lanes, signal upgrades, intersection improvements, pedestrian crossings, and super street intersection projects. However, in the recent years, due to inflation, some of those proposed improvements started exceeding the $200,000 limit. Of course, in 2024, House Bill 516 passed, and it raised the contract limit to that $500,000. So far, the local grants has received 71 quick response projects for fiscal year 25. They're in various stages from approval to contract. 26 of those total projects are over $200,000, so that's roughly 36%. 14 of those 26 projects that are over $200,000 are under contract. Of the 26 projects, 12 are between $200,000 to $300,000, 8 are between $300,000 to $400,000, and 6 are between $400,000 to $500,000. Now, for these 26 projects that are over $200,000, there are 7 different types of operational improvements, with right and left turn lane projects being the most at 54%. Our first project over $200,000 to be completed this year was in Coweta County. It was a striping and lane modification project that provided for 2 lanes of traffic on State Route 14 between I-85 and Bridgeport Parkway. And it was to improve the capacity and operations of the southbound direction. It was completed last December for around $266,000. So in less than a year since the passing of House Bill 516, we are starting to see the positive effect that this new limit is having on delivering needed operational improvements on our state route system throughout Georgia. Thank you.
Do I have any questions? Yes, Ms. McIntyre?
What makes the quick response quick? I mean, what are those projects not having to do that makes them faster?
Well, one of the things is they're only located within the right-of-way, so there's no right-of-way purchase. So that allows us to do, work with the environmental office through what they call the JEPA process. It's a shortened environmental procedure. So that, in a nutshell, really expedites the project. The plans are normally, fairly simple, and direct. Like I said, there's only, there's not a ton of different types of projects, but they make a big impact a lot of times, especially the turn lane projects where extended turn lanes, those types of things. So they not only help the state route system, a lot of times they help the off-system routes as well.
The other item, Bill, is under the state law that this actually can be non-solicited bids, but what we do is we seek 3 bids from contractors. So instead of doing the monthly call like we do here, whenever a project's ready, the district then can go contact 3 contractors, one of which has to be a DBE, and get pricing, and then we take the lowest bid. And so you don't have to wait. So you can just move as quickly as the district, and most all these are district designed. As Bill said, very minimal design to, if you're just going to extend a turn lane, it doesn't take a whole lot of, keep it very simple, just get the environmental. There is sometimes coordination with utility adjustments. We try to minimize projects so you don't have major utility impacts. So we can just move a lot more agile, and the state law gives us that flexibility to do so.
Okay, thank you.
We love $1 million, but we had to, and 500,000, again, as Bill showed you, doesn't go as far as you would think. Just building a left turn lane on a 2-lane road, you can't hardly do that for 500,000. You can do right turn lanes, maybe some extension of left turn lanes, but it's just still dollars. And the roundabout that you showed there in Banks County, the district did a lot of grading themselves, so don't think that $500,000 did that roundabout. The district self-performed a lot of work and then came in with a contract to do some of the things that they couldn't do necessarily. So and there's a lot of partnership projects like that too. District 3 is really good about that, working with counties and cities to partner for them to do some work, and then we can contract to do some work, and sometimes our maintenance crews do some work to deliver a bigger project. But it's a great tool in the toolbox to move fast.
Thank you.
Jamie? Good.
There was an off-ramp off 316 in Oconee County that got real clogged, so they just added a right turn lane to that off-ramp. And gosh, it got done quickly, and it made it very workable.
Any other comments or questions? Bill, I want to say that this is very valuable information. I think we need reviews on this and updates, maybe a little more often than what we have had in the past, because I think our communities certainly benefit from all of this, and it's a good reminder to us as board members, too, the benefit that is created for our communities around the state of Georgia. I also want to say I am always delighted when you come sit in a meeting that I'm in with some of my folks from home. So it makes me feel real good that maybe there's some small project that we can come forward with. So thank you so much to your 4 staff members that are here. And if you would stand, please. I know he introduced you, but I want people to see you. So there they are, folks. They are the ones that do a lot of work for us throughout our communities. And thank you so much for this great report.
Thank you.
If there's no further no further comments for this meeting, we'll stand adjourned. But prior to that, I want to remind everyone that our board meets in the morning at 9 o'clock in this room. I look forward to having each and every one of you here, as well as those members of our audience. So adjourned.